Here is what makes this topic particularly difficult to talk about honestly. The mistakes that most reliably chase women away, the ones that quietly erode attraction until there is nothing left to save, almost never feel like mistakes when you are making them. They feel like the right thing. They feel like investment or care or honesty or passion. They feel like you are showing up, and that is exactly what makes them so costly, because a man who knows he is doing something wrong can stop. But a man who believes he is doing everything right, who is putting in genuine effort, who is trying to demonstrate his value, who is attempting to move the connection forward, that man has no reason to change course. He keeps doing the thing that is slowly pushing her away, and he cannot understand why the distance keeps growing. You have probably experienced a version of this, a connection that started with real promise, genuine interest on both sides, and then something shifted, gradually. Without a clear explanation, her energy changed, the warmth cooled, eventually she pulled back entirely, and you were left replaying the whole thing trying to identify the moment it turned. In most cases, there was no single moment. There was a pattern, a quiet accumulation of small behavioral signals that were changing how she saw you. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, in the way that water gradually reshapes stone. In this video, I am going to walk you through 5 of the most significant mistakes men make that chase women away, specifically the ones that feel like the right move while you are making them, the ones that masquerade as investment and care and effort, because those are the ones that do the most damage, precisely because they are hardest to recognize. Stay through all 5. The 5th one is the most counterintuitive and the one most men never connect to the outcome it produces. I'm Lyra. This is Mystique Psychology. If you're new here, subscribe to Mystique Psychology right now. Every week I break down the real mechanics of attraction and female psychology, not the surface version, the actual behavioral and psychological dynamics beneath it. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and let's get into it. Before the 5 mistakes, I need to establish something clearly, because without this understanding, what I am about to say will feel unfair. Good intentions do not protect attraction. That is not a cynical statement. It is a precise psychological observation. And once you understand why it is true, your entire framework for reading female behavior will shift. Attraction is not a response to effort. It is not a reward for how hard you are trying, or how much you care, or how clearly your investment is visible. Attraction is a response to the signals that behavior produces, and those signals operate below the level of conscious intention. A woman does not decide to lose interest in a man because she has evaluated his intentions and found them lacking. She feels it in the dynamic, in the quality of the interaction, in the invisible emotional atmosphere that forms around the way he behaves. This is why a man can try harder and harder, can invest more, communicate more, demonstrate more care, and feel the connection slipping further away with every increase in effort. The effort itself, in many cases, is the problem, not because effort is unattractive, because the specific quality of desperation that effort can carry, the invisible signal of anxiety beneath the action, is felt immediately, processed instinctively, and responded to by withdrawal. Women do not always know why they begin to pull back. They often cannot articulate it with precision, but they feel it in the body before the mind has formed an opinion. And once that feeling is in place, rational arguments and increased effort and demonstrations of value tend to deepen it rather than reverse it. That is the frame for everything that follows. 5 mistakes that feel like investment but read as something else entirely. Mistake number 1, moving emotionally faster than the connection has actually earned. This is one of the most common mistakes available in early attraction, and one of the most reliably damaging, precisely because the impulse that drives it is genuine, the feelings are real, the enthusiasm is authentic, and that authenticity makes it feel like the right thing to express. If you feel something, say it. If the connection seems special, name it. If you are genuinely drawn to her, let her know how much. But here is the psychology that most men miss entirely. Emotional investment, expressed too early, does not communicate value. It communicates need, and the distinction is everything. When a man declares strong feelings for a woman he has known for a few days or a few weeks, when he begins talking about the future, when he moves with a speed that suggests the relationship is already decided, the message his behavior sends is not, "I care about you deeply." The message is, "I am willing to assign enormous significance to someone I do not yet know well," which is the behavioral signature of a man who is not choosing carefully, who is, in fact, willing to attach to almost anyone who gives him the right kind of attention. Women are extraordinarily sensitive to this signal, not because they are calculating, but because they have developed an accurate instinct for the difference between a man who sees her specifically and a man who sees availability. When a man moves too fast emotionally, he unintentionally answers the most important question in her mind. Is this man choosing me, or is he choosing the experience of having someone? In precisely the wrong direction. Attraction grows through discovery, through tension, through the slow accumulation of genuine knowledge of another person. When a man tries to compress that process, to skip to the emotional conclusion before the connection has had the time to build the foundation that conclusion requires, he removes the very thing that makes it compelling, the discovery, the curiosity, the unresolved tension that creates the pull. Here is what genuine confidence looks like in the early stages of a connection. It looks like a man who is genuinely interested, who shows up, who engages, who is clearly present, but who is in no hurry to arrive anywhere, who is content to let the connection develop at the pace the connection requires, not because he is suppressing what he feels, but because he trusts that what is real will become visible in time. That patience in the landscape of attraction psychology is one of the most powerful signals available. It communicates that this man has standards, that he is choosing carefully, that his emotional investment means something because he does not give it away before it has been earned. Mistake number 2. Confusing the impulse to control with the expression of care. This mistake almost always begins in a place that feels entirely legitimate. A man has feelings for a woman and wants to protect them. He becomes attentive to where she is, who she is spending time with, why she has not responded. In the early stages, some women even interpret this attention as flattering, as evidence that she matters to him. But there is a line, and when that line is crossed, something fundamental changes in the dynamic, because what begins as attention becomes surveillance. What presents itself as care reveals itself as anxiety, and what was supposed to draw her closer begins instead to constrict. Here is the psychology beneath possessiveness that most men never fully examine. Possessiveness is not an expression of how much you value someone. It is an expression of how insecure you are in your own value. A man who genuinely believes in his own worth, who trusts that what he offers is compelling, that his presence in her life is something she would choose to keep, does not need to monitor or restrict or control. He is secure enough to allow space because he trusts that in that space she will choose him. The man who controls is the man who does not trust that she would choose him freely, and she feels that distrust, not as protection, not as care, but as the specific pressure of someone who does not believe he is enough. And that pressure, that invisible signal of insecurity operating beneath the surface of what is presented as concern, is one of the most reliable destroyers of attraction available. Psychologists describe this as psychological reactance, When a person feels that their freedom is being restricted, the instinctive response is to push against the source of the restriction. The tighter the grip, the stronger the desire to escape, not because she does not care, but because genuine connection cannot exist inside a dynamic that feels like management. What confidence looks like in practice: space, genuine, comfortable, easy space, the calm certainty that her freedom is not a threat to what you have together, the ability to let her exist fully in her own life without needing to account for every moment of it. That calm, that ease, that trust, that is what makes a man feel safe to come closer to. Control makes her look for the exit. Mistake number 3, letting your past contaminate her present. Every man has history, relationships that ended, experiences that shaped him, people who mattered and then, for whatever reason, were no longer part of the story. That is not the mistake. The mistake is when that history refuses to stay in the past, when it keeps arriving in the present, in the conversations with a new person who had nothing to do with it. This mistake shows up in 2 specific forms. Both are damaging, and both reveal the same underlying problem. The first form is comparison. My ex used to do it differently. She would have loved this. The one before you was more like this in that way. Every comparison, however casually delivered, however innocent the intention, produces the same effect in the woman listening to it. She begins to feel like a replacement, like she has been cast in a role that someone else once held. And no woman wants to feel that her specific, irreplaceable self is interchangeable with the last version of the person who filled this position. The comparison removes her uniqueness, and uniqueness is the foundation on which personal attraction is built. The second form is more insidious. It is bitterness. The long story about betrayal, the detailed account of how unfairly he was treated, the narrative in which he is the victim and she is the villain, and the injustice of it is something he is clearly still carrying. Men who do this often believe they are being honest. They are explaining why they are the way they are. They are giving context. But here is what the woman across from him is actually processing. If this connection ends, is this how he will tell that story too? Women pay very close attention to how a man speaks about people who are not present to offer their version of events. It tells her something specific about his emotional maturity, his capacity to take accountability, to move forward without resentment, to grow from difficult experiences rather than simply surviving them and assigning blame. A man who cannot leave the past in the past is a man who is still living in it. And a woman who is interested in building something new does not want to be doing that construction in the shadow of someone else's story. The past should inform your wisdom. It should not dominate your conversations. What you carry from your history into a new connection determines the quality of the foundation you are building. Mistake number 4, breaking your word in small ways and underestimating what each small breach actually costs. This is the mistake that most men take least seriously, because each individual instance seems genuinely insignificant. You said you would call and then got busy. You suggested a plan and then had to cancel. You mentioned something you would do and then it quietly fell away. None of these feel like major failures. In isolation, they aren't. The problem is that attraction is not shaped by isolated moments. It is shaped by patterns, and the pattern that inconsistency produces, the specific emotional climate that forms when a woman learns that your words and your actions do not reliably correspond, is one of the most damaging environments available to an early connection. Here is the precise psychological mechanism. When a man consistently does what he says he will do, a woman's nervous system begins to relax around him. The uncertainty that characterizes early attraction begins to resolve into trust. She can invest emotionally because she has evidence that this investment is safe. that this person is someone whose behavior she can predict, whose word she can rely on, whose presence creates stability rather than anxiety. When a man is inconsistent, when the small promises disappear, when the follow-through is unreliable, when there is a persistent gap between what he says and what he actually does, the opposite happens. Her system cannot relax. She begins to hold back emotional investment because the signals suggest that investing is risky, not because she has consciously evaluated and rejected him, because the felt sense of uncertainty produces withdrawal as a protective response. And here is the painful irony. Many men who are inconsistent in these small ways compensate with occasional grand gestures. They cancel plans 3 times and then organize something elaborate to make up for it. They go silent for days and then reappear with significant effort. They believe the big moments balance the small failures. They do not. Research on trust formation consistently demonstrates that reliability in the ordinary, everyday, low-stakes moments is more predictive of long-term trust than intensity in significant moments. She is not watching for the grand gesture. She is watching whether you do the small things you said you would do. Every time you keep a small commitment, you are building something. Every time you break one, however casually, however understandably, you are removing something, and what you are removing is harder to rebuild than it was to build in the first place. 4 mistakes down, 1 to go, and this final one is the most counterintuitive of all, the one that feels most like the right move, while it quietly produces the worst outcome. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop a comment on which of these 4 you recognize most clearly, and let's finish this. Mistake number 5, losing your balance in conversation and not realizing that both extremes of imbalance produce the same result. This mistake is unique because it manifests in 2 entirely opposite forms, and yet both forms, despite their apparent difference, signal the same underlying thing: the absence of genuine self-possession. The first form is excessive timidity, a man who enters a conversation already doubting himself, who avoids expressing opinions because he fears disagreement, who defers constantly, who waits for her to set the direction, who hesitates at every small decision, who orbits the interaction rather than participating in it, always seeking her approval before committing to any position. This pattern feels, from the inside, like respect, like not imposing, like giving her space. But what it produces in the dynamic is very different. It creates an imbalance. It places the entire emotional momentum of the interaction on her side. She becomes responsible for keeping things moving, for generating energy, for making the decisions that he will not make, and eventually that imbalance becomes exhausting. Attraction requires a sense of direction, not dominance, not control, but the quiet signal that there is someone here who knows himself and is comfortable showing it. When that signal is absent, the connection begins to feel unsteady. The second form is the mirror opposite, the man who compensates for underlying insecurity by filling every available moment with noise, who talks constantly, who dominates every conversation, who interrupts and redirects and never allows the space for the other person to actually exist in the exchange, who believes this is charisma and discovers, eventually, that it reads as exhausting. Genuine connection requires reciprocity. It requires space, space to listen, space to observe, space for both people to contribute. When one person occupies all of it, the conversation stops being a discovery and starts being a performance. And performances, however impressive, do not create intimacy. They create an audience, not a partner. Both extremes, the excessive silence and the relentless noise, reveal the same root: an uncomfortable relationship with one's own presence. The man who effaces himself is trying to avoid rejection. The man who overwhelms is trying to avoid the discomfort of genuine listening. Both strategies are driven by anxiety, and anxiety, whatever form it takes, is felt immediately in the quality of the interaction. What genuine confidence looks like in conversation is neither of these things. It is presence. The ability to speak when you have something real to say. The ability to listen, genuinely, without performing patience, without waiting for your turn, when the moment calls for it. The ability to sit in silence without needing to fill it. The ability to hold a position without rigidity and to release it without collapsing. That balance, calm, grounded, responsive without being reactive, is what creates the specific quality of interaction that women describe as someone they could actually talk to. And that quality, in the landscape of genuine attraction, is rarer and more compelling than almost anything else available. Now, let me bring these together, because there is a single thread running through all five of these mistakes, and once you see it, your understanding of what attraction actually responds to will be permanently clearer. Every one of these mistakes is a behavioral expression of insecurity operating beneath a surface presentation of something else. Moving too fast emotionally presents as enthusiasm. The insecurity beneath it is the fear that if you do not secure the connection quickly, you will lose it. Possessiveness presents as care. The insecurity beneath it is the fear that if you give her freedom, she will use it to choose someone else. Talking about the past presents as honesty. The insecurity beneath it is the inability to move forward, the unresolved wound that has not healed enough to stay where it belongs. Inconsistency presents as being relaxed about small things. The insecurity beneath it is a weak relationship with your own word, a quiet belief that your commitments are not important enough to maintain. And conversational imbalance presents as either deference or confidence. The insecurity beneath it is the inability to simply be present without needing to manage how you are being received. Attraction does not respond to the surface presentation. It responds to what is operating underneath. Women are not evaluating the gesture. They are reading the energy behind it. And the energy of insecurity, in whatever form it takes, produces the same withdrawal response regardless of how it is wrapped. The inverse is equally true. Genuine self-possession, a man who is comfortable in himself, who is not performing his value, or managing her perception, or trying to secure something he is afraid of losing, produces a completely different quality of interaction. One that does not need to be forced or manufactured. One that creates the specific felt sense of safety and interest and authentic attraction that no amount of effort or strategy can replicate. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Not in theory, in the specific behavioral moment-to-moment reality of being with a woman you are genuinely interested in. On emotional pacing, let the connection develop at its own speed. Be genuinely present, genuinely interested, genuinely engaged, and let the feelings that are real become visible gradually as they are earned by actual knowledge of the person. The patience itself communicates more than any declaration. On space, trust that what you have to offer is compelling. Give her room to exist fully in her own life. The ease with which you allow that space tells her more about your confidence than anything you could say. On the past, keep it there. What your history taught you is valuable. The person in front of you is not a replacement for what came before. She is a separate story. Give her the full attention of that. On your word, make smaller commitments and keep them completely. Not grand promises you cannot sustain. Small ones you will follow through on without exception. Build the pattern of reliability in the ordinary moments. That is what trust is actually made of. On your presence, stop trying to manage how you are being received. Say what you actually think. Listen with genuine interest rather than performed patience. Be willing to take up space without taking over the room. That balance, present without overwhelming, engaged without effacing, is what genuine confidence actually looks and feels like. None of this is about becoming someone different. It is about removing the layers of performance and anxiety that are distorting what is already there. What is underneath those layers, the specific person you actually are, is already compelling. The work is simply to let it be visible. 5 mistakes. Moving emotionally faster than the connection has earned, and the signal that speed sends about how carefully you are choosing. Confusing control with care, and the specific freedom that genuine confidence allows, letting the past contaminate the present, and what your history reveals about your emotional maturity, breaking your word in small ways, and the quiet erosion of trust that each small breach produces, and losing your balance in conversation, both forms of it, and what they share beneath the surface. None of these mistakes make a man unattractive in some permanent, unfixable way. They are patterns, and patterns can be changed, but only once they are recognized. Only once you can see clearly what you are doing and what it is actually communicating beneath the intention. Attraction does not collapse overnight. It erodes through accumulation, through the slow, quiet change in how a woman begins to see you when the patterns repeat. But that same principle works in the other direction. Small, consistent, genuine changes in behavior, maintained over time, produce a completely different quality of presence, one that does not need to be performed, one that is simply felt. That is the work, not of becoming someone impressive, of becoming more fully yourself, without the anxiety, without the performance, without the invisible signals of insecurity that push away the very thing you are trying to keep. Now, I want to hear from you. Of these 5 mistakes, which one resonates most with something you have personally experienced? Which one names something you have been doing without fully recognizing what it was communicating? And if you are honest, which one is the hardest to stop? Drop it in the comments. The most specific answers are always the most useful. And I read everyone. If this gave you something today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That is how this channel reaches the people it is actually built for. Subscribe if you haven't. New content every week, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm Lyra. This is Mystique Psychology. Take care of yourselves.